It's a special time whenever an independent film manages to Trojan horse its way through mainstream Hollywood's impenetrable walls and win big at the box office. Just look at Obsession. Rave reviews, early awards buzz, and nearly $400 million in ticket sales, against a budget of less than $1 million. That is all. You could argue the success of Obsession only further reinforces the reality that incinerating money to fuel a perpetual hamster wheel of franchise blockbusters just isn't as feasible as it once was. Marvel, DC, Star Wars, they all still have loyal fans who will show up to new movies rain or shine, but I think even the biggest diehards can admit that the universal attention they once commanded is well over by this point. Nothing kills widespread interest more completely than stagnation and lack of variation, especially over time. It's like fast food. Sure, people still go to McDonald's, it's still successful, but nobody gets excited for it anymore. It's familiar, it's convenient, it's reliable, it's the same thing every time. Mainstream movies will stay mainstream, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't crave something different and fresh. It's a wonder then that as much as people talk about wanting new movies, lining up to buy tickets for them is another story entirely. If audiences claim to want original movies, then why is it so difficult for independent studios to make original movies? First and foremost, it needs to be stated plainly that any shift from franchises and IPs to smaller scale authenticity will not be spearheaded by any of the big five Hollywood studios. Go watch any of my previous videos if you don't believe me. They're corporate entities run by faceless executives with a complete disregard for artistic integrity and who only care about how much money they line their pockets with. Changing course now could jeopardize a surefire payday. Do you really expect them to rock the boat? After all, it's more difficult to market an original property. Nobody knows what it is, and no one wants to risk wasting their hard-earned money to see a movie they wind up hating. Familiar IPs practically sell themselves. People associate good memories of previous movies with the new one before it's even released. Bonus points if you have an iconic soundtrack you can blast in the trailer. The rich get richer by doing less work. Truly inspiring stuff. Well then what makes an independent studio any different? Easy. They're not corporate husks. They are businesses, and businesses exist to make a profit, but there's a big difference between a mom and pop shop that charges more but puts genuine effort and care into what they offer customers, and something like Walmart that may be cheaper but might as well wear on their sleeve just how little they care about their clientele. Any smaller company will lack the money and resources of the big boys. They have to set themselves apart in order to succeed, and often the difference is a higher quality product and more intimate experience provided by people who actually care. Independent studios arguably have it even tougher though, since the giant they're going up against is a cultural one. The argument so often becomes, if a movie is really that good, then how come no one has ever even heard of it? Once again, mainstream Hollywood has a massive advantage in terms of both finances and influence. Marketing an upcoming film takes serious money, typically 50 cents for every dollar of production costs, but sometimes even more than that. Indie studios are already working on tight budgets. In what world is it reasonable to expect a $2 million movie to cast as wide a net as a $200 million movie? Not to mention the power of the brand. Is the average person more likely to get excited for a new Bleecker Street movie or a new Disney movie? It sounds like a stupid question, but the fact that it sounds stupid only further proves my point. None of this even addresses how cutthroat the business has become. Most indie studios can only afford one of either production or distribution, and this turns what should be an outlet for creativity into a strategic and financial maze. Producers have to be more picky which scripts they choose to fund. New voices tend to get buried beneath proven commodities. And even if everything goes right, investors could pull out at the last minute, or you don't secure the grants or tax incentives you were banking on, and the plug is pulled to minimize losses. Oh yeah, and did I mention that roughly only 3% of independent films ever manage to turn a profit? Even getting one made is an uphill battle, let alone pitting it against a lineup of Hollywood blockbusters with the expectation of selling at least some tickets. release. That's if it even gets to theaters at all. Remember when I said most indie outfits can only afford either production or distribution? Well, for the ones that choose the former, there's a growing reliance on film festivals to secure distribution deals.
We got it to Sundance!
They hopefully get approval to premiere their movie at the festival, and hopefully the right people see it, and hopefully those people enjoy it, and hopefully the sales agent has a good conversation with those people, and hopefully a halfway decent deal is struck. Sometimes distribution falls to a parent company, other times it's handled by yet another independent studio. Have you ever wondered why some movies show so many logos before they start? Between splitting costs during production and securing distribution later down the line, this is why. Sometimes the quality of an indie film's theatrical distribution is so awful and the returns so diminishing it may as well have never even been released at all. The logic behind limited releases is sound. Test the market, see if there's audience interest, and go from there. But so many smaller movies never make it past this point that it starts to feel like arbitrary gatekeeping after a while. Some distributors demand insane success before they'll even consider spending more money on a wide release. As someone who lives in Arkansas, I can't tell you the number of times I've wanted to see a movie in theaters but wasn't able to because it was only being shown in huge cities for entire months at a time. Audiences do exist in more remote areas too, so what good does it do to alienate them like that? And then there's the issue of keeping indie films on the big screen for any length of time. A common complaint ever since the pandemic has been just how brief theatrical runs have become before going to digital. I agree, that sucks. Take a wild guess which movies have been most affected by this blink and you miss it release format. And remember, most of these smaller films don't have the most optimal marketing in the world getting the word out, so they're often only given a week or two to make back what little they can before being yanked. And this isn't usually distribution's fault, this tends to fall on movie theaters themselves, but I don't entirely hold it against them because the pandemic very nearly snuffed their industry out, and streaming is still trying to finish the job. Mainstream movies, no matter how bad, are simply safer from an economic standpoint, and with rising screen scarcity due to theater shutdowns since 2020, this gives big studios even more booking power than they already had. If you're a theater owner desperately trying to stay in business, do you dedicate an entire screen to an indie darling that's selling maybe 2 or 3 tickets per show, or do you open that screen up in favor of a summer blockbuster, a surefire seller? It's nothing personal, it's just trying to keep the doors open. Oh, but streaming! It can still do well on streaming! Ah yes, the content landfill, where movies famously go to break even. Let's just say there's a reason indie studios still take their chances theatrically rather than go straight to digital. Do you finally understand the plight of the independent studio? If you've seen any of my previous videos, you may expect my usual shtick, kicking them while they're down, pointing and laughing at their bleak outlook and future, but looking deeper and being aware of the nature of their business, that would be the wrong reaction. What they go through are merely the realities of being an independent studio. Every day is a struggle, but it's worth it for them because they care about the art of filmmaking. They care about telling stories. They care about conveying emotions. They care about exploring uncomfortable topics and truths. They care about saying something real. Not every indie movie ever made is good, but the fact that people believed in it enough to take a chance on it at all is still beautiful, which is why it's such a shame that Hollywood has become so corporate and sanitized and is so unwilling to go where the money may not follow. It reminds me of this interview clip of Charlie Kaufman.
It seems to me like it's a circular problem in that, people who make movies see things that do well, and then they continue to make those things because they continue to do well, and then that becomes this sort of cycle, and everything else becomes excluded from that. And then when you start making these giant movies that cost $100 million and more, then they have to do really well. And if that's what you're doing, if that's what you're making, then they have to be really. I think they have to be really conventional because no one is going to spend that kind of money on something that they don't have a kind of a certainty that's going to do well. If you make a superhero movie that looks like it should do well and doesn't do well, you don't get fired for it. But if you make a movie that no one thinks is going to do well and you take a chance and it doesn't do well, you don't have a job anymore. So everybody's running scared. And I think it sucks, I think it sucks for audiences. I think it sucks for filmmakers. And I think it's an unfortunate thing for our society because I think people are not being fed anything that's That's substantial.
That's why something like Obsession coming out of nowhere and dominating is such a big deal. It keeps Capstone, T-Shop, and Under the Shell in business a little while longer. It reassures Blumhouse that helping to fund smaller films like this is a good thing. It cements Curry Barker's career. It helps him secure funding for future projects, be it from studios or private investors. It proves that people do want alternatives to the typical fare they've grown accustomed to. And it proves that we as moviegoers do not have to settle for less. But can independent studios truly compete with Hollywood's Big Five? Well, not in the traditional sense. They won't get ahead by spending more money or trying to make bigger movies. They need to lean into what makes their movies special, but there are still chances they can take. Be willing to discover new young voices in filmmaking. Continue taking creative risks as stories demand. Really take the time to find your audience and make a concentrated effort to market toward them instead of trying to mass appeal to people who don't want your product. Take a page out of A24's playbook and build a strong word of mouth. Get people talking about and getting hyped for your upcoming releases. I admire people who are willing to struggle to produce art, but that doesn't mean it has to be a struggle in order for art to be worthwhile. There's nothing wrong with anyone making things a little easier for themselves, especially when it's within their means to do so. Remember, money is the industry's first and only language. Where audiences spend their money is what audiences are voting to receive more of. Just as it's our civic duty to vote politically, it's our civic duty to vote culturally as well. No more live-action remakes, please. Obsession and other smaller films finding success doesn't have to be a once-in-a-blue-moon event. It can happen far more frequently and even become the norm so long as we cast our votes and allow it to happen. Support independent cinema.